I just noticed, any of you paying attention, by the way, I just noticed I hadn't switched on recording, so which I've just done, so I shouldn't really rely just on my note taking in case I miss something. But no, okay. All right,
you know, is your suggestion going to be a little different from Paul?
I think the core mechanism on Discovery is similar, but it did have a lot more out-of-band processes to go with it, Jason, to more broadly mirror the approach taken by Chrome and Microsoft.
Having something in an IETF draft that says company A does X, Y, Z is usually not something that will fly. So if we move it to a draft, and we'll have a discussion on Wednesday, I believe, we'll have to think about how we word that so it is not kind of like just Google or Microsoft doing something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It'll be this is the total end-to-end process that would be followed by a company, not specifically by Google, for example. That would be a bit weird.
Well, I mean, to Ralph's point, he's dead on accurate. Although it is always good to hear, well, we actually tried this, and here's what we learned. That's that little dose of reality part that the IETF sometimes lacks. It's always good to bring it in when you have it. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess it's only a draft, so from that point of view, I guess you're leaning, without putting words in your mouth, Glenn, you're leaning towards better to have a deeper pool of material to draw from at this stage than not.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good, in these early stages, I think it's good to have material that can later be morphed or removed or added into somebody else's than to say, well, we have this great idea, but we never wrote it down.
Yeah.
One thing that occurs to me is you could actually, instead of saying like, well, this is the way that these guys have, decided to implement, so therefore you should adopt it. Maybe a section could be added, simply said like, current observations and experiences. To simply say, this is what in the wild, because I think we're going to end up with, clearly input from a variety of different sources, whether it's, DO operators, ISPs, or application developers, all of which are coming out this, similar direction, but different approaches to getting there. And I think documenting these different approaches is really valuable right now, because in the next round, we're going to have to sort of say, okay, well, they're doing X and they're doing Y and they're doing Z. How does that come together into something coherent and as a standard?
Yeah.
So documenting what people are actually doing today is helpful in that, getting that discussion.
Okay. Yeah, noted, and I'm sure everybody else will have taken the reminder as well with regards any papers to.
And I put in for a single long session. I didn't think we could. I think stretching over 2 sessions would be painful. So I put in for Dave, and I put in for like the single, what is it, 100-minute block, I think it is. So hopefully we get that in the schedule, so that we only have to dial in one weird day of bizarre time zones for it.
It depends where you're located, Glenn, of course.
It does. The other aspect is I'll just remind people to register for it if you're attending, and read carefully the part about whether you have to pay or if you don't want to offer to pay. It seems to actually be sort of a voluntary selection process, as far as I can tell.
Right.
Interesting.
And there is the early bird for those that are paying. The early bird date is, I think, if I remember right, at the end of this week.
Yeah, so 26th. So this is the week to do it if you're going to pay.
Yeah.
Glenn, do you know if the plan for the IETF meeting will be to run multiple working group sessions in parallel, like they would normally do at a physical meeting, or is it going to follow the model that we had for the virtual Vancouver meeting, where the working groups were essentially being spread across a month?
I've heard nothing official to like the working group chairs. They haven't really told us anything. But I gotta say, if all the groups decide to meet, I don't see how they could possibly do it without doing some overlap. And I know the data tracker, when we put the request in, did the usual request of, well, what can't you conflict with? So
yeah,
we put in a good long list for ADD of conflicts to avoid. So hopefully it should be available.
I certainly got the impression, Jim, from the questionnaire feedback that the intent was to run parallel sessions this time and complete the thing over a week, not spread it over a month or more, which would be an absolute nightmare scheduling wise.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the secretariat would just be like done. Like you got to work for a month, running meetings every single day. The secretariat would just, if I was them, I'd throw my hands up and say, "I'm out of here." Like, no way.
Yeah, particularly in given time zones, that would be challenging for some.
This could be fun for me because I could end up having to monitor, multiple IETF working group sessions that are going on at the same time, and then doing the same kind of thing at an I2 meeting that's taking place that overlaps with IETF 108. Yay!
We've all been there, Jim. I mean, I've sat in working sessions with an earbud in, dialed into another remote working session. So.
Yeah, but I could be doing that monitoring across multiple sessions and multiple standards organizations at the same time. It's not just 2 clashes, it could be 4 or 6.
Well, just remember to make the right comments in the right channel.
Yes. Do you get to charge 6 times for your attendance though, Jim? That would be the trick.
I'm working on cloning myself.
Jim, just crank up the accent really thick, and that way, when you make a comment on a microphone, you can say, "Oh no, that's not what I said."
So, any other thoughts on the IETF as we're there then?
This is Simon, please. I assume that you will later be able to register for free, but they just won't include any T-shirts or whatever it is they're offering for registering and paying.
Well, that's a hell of an expensive T-shirt then.
No, very expensive T-shirt. That's what I'm kind of wondering here.
Sounds like you have to test.
So my understanding on that, Simon, was that they're having to do some tweaks to the registration system to enable it to support the registration without paying for so many people. So I know the secretary was working on that. I think this is the week they said they'd have it up and going, didn't they?
Yeah, there is you can attest now online that you can't afford to pay for it.
Right. Yeah. I'm looking at the registration page, and it's not offering any free registration. So if there is, it's kind of well hidden down the weeds somewhere.
Well, as I remember, Simon, I think they had funding for, was it 100 free places from a sponsor?
Right.
So I think if you indicate that you would have trouble funding it, it obviously depends on volume as to whether yours would be accepted. And dare I say, it might depend on the organization you're from as to whether you can credibly plead poverty. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, right.
Well, no, so they evolved it after that, Andrew. So based upon feedback from everybody, they evolved it to say, like, it's no longer this 100 cap anymore. It's like you can say I'm not going to pay, or if you're willing to pay, you can pay. Is my understanding.
But I assume whereas before they had a largest fee-paying contingent that was adequate to support almost unlimited online, then they're no longer in that position, of course, because there isn't any physical attending group that will be forced to pay.
Yeah, I mean they do. I mean, there's been a long discussion in the IETF mailing list about this, but a third of the revenue for the IETF comes from meeting attendees.
Yes.
And while they don't have to spend money on providing cookies to people for breaks, there still is the cost of like the IETF secretariat, which it does a lot of the work, actually making these run and paying for like the thing, all the other pieces that make the IETF work, and that does need to be.
Yeah.
Although I will say the rate is much lower than it normally is for in-person meetings.
Yes.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. I can see on the chat, if anyone's not looking at that, that in the order that they're posted, Jim's put a link to the important dates for IETF 108. Tommy has put a link to the registration fees. And Paul has put a polite reminder for those of us who should be supporting the organisation regardless of a free option.
I agree with Paul.
to sort of build on Glenn's point that somehow they've got to try and get roughly a third of their revenue, whether or not it's virtual or face-to-face.
And I will point out and somewhat defend the IETF in that of all of the standards orgs I work with, I think they have the smallest budget of pretty much anybody in the business. They do things very much on a shoestring compared to any other organization. I mean, look at ICANN. We just mentioned ICANN, and their per meeting budget, I think, per one meeting is probably the IETF for about 2 or 3 years.
Yes, or to put the current, I think it's $200 is the current ticket price. I think.
260, $230.
Okay,
230 or 280 after Friday.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, if you were planning to attend Black Hat USA 2020, as I'm sure we all are, that's over $1,000 to attend the virtual event.
Yeah. And just another data point, Glenn, on the ICANN meetings, is that their budgets for meetings are so extensive because large numbers of the attendees have the travel and accommodation paid for by ICANN.
Yes. Well, and they do put on a pretty good production. If you've ever wandered into their equipment room during one of those meetings, it looks like a concert. The number of travel gearboxes that they have, it's quite impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not cheap to run global events, I guess, is the conclusion of all of that. Who knew?
And there's profit to be had in selling domain names, apparently.
Yeah, right.
Indeed.
You mean you can sell them?
Well, only for a little bit of time, then you have to sell them again. It's the perfect model.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, I think duly noted. Glenn, a polite reminder for people to log their papers sooner rather than later, and also register so you can actually take part in the discussion about your paper in the working group, assuming that your agenda slot request is approved, which hopefully it will be.
Exactly. That was the next thing I want to mention. In all seriousness, that if you want to speak on the agenda, we put in for a 100-minute slot. And based upon the last ADD meeting, it was very well attended. I think, if I recall, we had well over 250 people online in that session. And it went really well. And we had a lot of speakers. We didn't allow, I think, enough time for speaking or for questions. So I'm going to try to add a little more question time in this time. But if you do want a speaking slot, please send a note to the ADD working group chairs mailing list or directly to Dave and myself. With a request for how long you need and what topic you want to speak on.
I guess you need that in sooner rather than later, Glenn, so you can plan the agenda.
Sooner rather than later is always good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else on the IETF 108 or IETF more generally? Nope. Okay. As I say, I'm going to come on to ECH and actually resolve a policy in a moment, but has anyone got anything else that they would like to bring up whilst we're gathered together today? Okay. Silence is no for...
Well, I'll add that the Chrome rollout is continuing and they're upping their percentages. I don't know if you put that in your newsletter or not. I don't remember reading it.
Do you want to expand on that, John? Because I think the last I saw, they were largely done in North America. I've not heard in terms of. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of Mozilla rather than Chrome. Apologies. Sorry, do you want to expand on your point?
Trying to find the exact numbers here. Chrome. They sent out another. Kenji sent out another note with dates. Here we go. Chrome continues forward with DOH. Current step is 10% from June 5th until June 12th. Next step is 25% June 12th to June 17th. Then current step, 25% from June 18th to June 23rd. Next step, 50% from June 23rd to June 26th. So steady increase in auto conversion on Chrome clients. New rollouts of Chrome clients.
Yeah. So presumably, those of you running open resolvers that are registered with Chrome, John, will be seeing a continuing uplift in volumes then.
Correct, and that does match our growth. So far, no problems or even any comments. It's happening seamlessly.
Yeah. Just while we're talking about browsers, I don't know if any of you picked up on the problem with Firefox with Do with release 77, which I think was upgraded very quickly in about 24 hours or so, which it was effectively performing a denial of service attack on Next DNS, unintentionally, I hasten to add, and they had to tweak the mechanism. And as I recall, I think it was a function of the number of calls going to the resolver that was causing the problem. There's quite a good piece. I put a link in the weekly updates this morning. There's quite a good link, a good piece on Twit TV, explaining the problem. They did about a 15-minute piece on it a week or so ago, which is well worth watching if you've not picked up on it and have an interest.
It did make me think of though might have some interesting effects on stateful firewalls. Just the number of sessions you suddenly get that you didn't have before.
Yes.
Yeah. It's all very well in a home where you've got a relatively small number of devices and a relatively small number of browsers or clients, although even there, given the size of most CPEs, but big corps, you suddenly have, you've got enough to deal with DNS, and now you've got a huge number of sessions that are just supporting DNS, and they're likely to be persistent, to be performant, as was mentioned in that.
Well, it seemed to be peculiar to NextDNS not affecting Cloudflare, or at least that's...
Yeah, well, that might be because Cloudflare's, it may be just a warning. You really do have to be fairly aggressive about being nasty to clients. If they're not talking to you, kick their session.
Yeah. Yeah, so think about session lengths and such like.
Yeah.
If only there was a way of decentralizing DNS.
Yeah. and having resolvers, more local to the client in the same network even.
Amazing.
Or use stateless protocols to communicate with DNS.
Oh, no, come on.
That's crazy talk. That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
Although even with stateless, I have to say, we turn to keep most state tables down. It's like DNS is a special case. It's sort of you're not getting 30 seconds for UDP. No way. No how.
Okay. Well, anyone else want to bring anything up before I go on to ECH? No. Okay, just briefly, firstly on ECH, and then I'll go back onto resolver policy. With ECH, just sort of reflecting on discussions from a week or two back, and the number of impacts of ECH. This is the effectively the upgraded version of encrypted SNI, but albeit it covers more than encrypted SNI. But just sort of reviewing the impacts that people called out during our discussion, that looks like that's potentially quite far-reaching, and it doesn't seem to be getting much attention within the ecosystem currently. So I'm going to put together a short sort of one-page note just to sort of summarize some of the key points about it. But I'd certainly encourage you on the assumption it's going to be on the agenda for IETF 108, that in addition to going to the no doubt excellent ADD working group discussion, you may well want to go to the attend the TLS working group discussion as well, and assuming that ECH is on the agenda, rather than only catch up on it after the standard is ratified, at which point it might be too late. So I'll put something out on that in a week or so, just to help crystallize the points, as I say, for the various people flagged when we talked about it 2-3 weeks back, just for reference. And in a similar vein, I'm taking it, Joey, that's a deliberately sort of thumbs up. That's a good thing, as opposed to you were raising your hand to make a point.
Correct. Just saying thank you for the info.
Okay, good. Yeah. So also on the resolver policy, various people have sort of provided comments, so thank you for those. I'm going to put out an updated version, which I'll include with the notes to this call, which is streamlined to make it easier to read from top to bottom, albeit with some footnotes at the end of the document. So there are still some footnotes, or more accurately endnotes in it, to expand on a couple of points, but the intent is to make it easier to read, and it will be good to get your feedback as to, from your respective organizations, if you've not already done so, whether you think that would be a useful policy document for you to adopt, and indicate that you are sort of working with those practices as outlined. So that's the intent. I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that. Feel free to just chime in now whilst we're talking. Otherwise, just look out for that attached to the notes of the call in a day or so's time for your perusal. Right, those were the only two things I had to pick up on from this week. As I say, I deliberately didn't have any people lined up, given that we've had quite a lot of heavy content over the last couple of weeks. The other thing I should say is Luca Derry, who presented on fingerprinting 2 weeks ago, is doing some additional work. So he is going to sort of join us again, probably in a couple of weeks' time, to share the additional work that he's done since the call at the start of the month, just so you can see how his work has evolved on the fingerprinting front. Just for reference, fingerprinting and DPI, I should have said more accurately. He covered both of those. And I think actually his focus is more on DPI than it is on fingerprinting with the additional work. So expect more of that from Luca in a couple of weeks' time. Right, so that was everything I had to cover. So again, does anyone want to bring anything else up this week?
Can I just make a short comment on the encrypted client hello?
Which can in.
Yeah, one thing that I would also note in relation to that is it has a couple of fairly meaty dependencies as well. One on some new record types in DNS, and the other one on a hybrid encryption mechanism. So you may also want to look at the dependencies.
Yeah, duly noted, Ian. Okay, last chance for any other comments from anyone before Ian fires up his Defender console and gets a sneaky game in. Sorry, Brett rather fires up his Defender console and gets a sneaky game in before the next call. It's a shame we ought to try and get you to link that onto the Zoom chat, do a screen share. That would be quite fun for those of us with a memory for that sort of thing from a misspent youth, which obviously doesn't apply to most people on this call, I'm sure. Right, okay, well, I'll take it from that then. That's everything for this week. So thanks all for your time. Don't forget to register for IETF if you haven't already done so. Take advantage of the early bird rate and start thinking about those many papers that you want to submit for the ATD working group to give Glenn a major scheduling headache, how he's going to fit it all in next month. And with that, thanks all for your time and have a great week. No doubt we'll speak next week.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.